So my name is Ephantus Kanyugi. I studied economics and finance in school. I am 30 years old, of age. Really liked the fact that if I did a course in finance, it felt like it was the best way to kind of find jobs, because at the time it wasn't very, things like IT were not very, prevalent and everything. I really liked computers, but, you're kind of trying to look at the landscape and you see, hey, maybe pursuing finance would give me better options. Yeah, but reality struck after finishing school. I actually finished in 2016. But unfortunately, I couldn't find a job. Most of the traditional jobs, we found that you couldn't find traditional jobs because a lot of the old people, people have been graduating since the 1960s, and there's a finite number of jobs. So those people are still there, and every year there are new people who are graduating. So it's kind of like the job opportunities have really shrinked unless you know someone, or, there's a way to get or there's a new company that's registering, but ideally you just need to know someone to get a job. So it was really tough because we come from, a humble background. So we don't really have someone who can hold your hand and help you find a job. So ideally did some, just manual jobs, just looking for things to do. I actually used to sell clothes in the streets. I'm not sure if you've seen the vendors in the streets.
Yes,
Yeah. So there's a time I did that. At another time we were subcontracted by Coca-Cola to kind of, go stand with sodas in bags, and then you kind of try to sell them off to people. At some point, we actually had animals at home. So at some point, I was actually taking care of the animals and then getting a small cut from that. But I think it was so I did that for 2 years, just doing, simple jobs here and there, trying to get some money. But then in 2018, a friend of mine came and said that he was working for a company. And the qualification that they had was you just needed to be really good at analytical thinking and then also be very good with your computer skills. And so I applied and I was called for the interview. The company was CloudFactory. So we went, did the test. I actually went the first time, did a test. I think I actually got a 40%. So I just left, never checked my emails. I just knew I had failed. But apparently the pass mark for that specific project, because it was very technical, I think the pass mark was 30%. But then I saw the email way after. And so tried to let them know that, hey, I had passed. You communicated that I should come, but I didn't get the opportunity. And then they had another opening later on, and that's when I was called. And then once we did the assessment again, passed, and that's when I was onboarded into CloudFactory. Yeah, that's how I got into the AI space. There we mostly did, data annotation jobs. Things like LiDAR technology and things of that nature. Sorry, I've already run very far ahead, but I think that's basically about me, I think.
Yeah, but I think it's also really good to also hear your background, where you come from, and also how you in the end, came up with the data work topic.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about the data work that you were doing by then?
CloudFactory was okay. I could say the work was okay. The issue was the structure of work. So we used to work in shifts. So it was an 8-hour shift, but it was split into 2. So it was a 4-hour shift, 4-hour shift. So when I say I had one shift, it meant that I was only working for 4 hours. And then if I was working for 8 hours, it was a 2-hour shift. So what would happen is people would get onboarded based on the availability of the project. So at times we had projects where we only worked for 1 week. It was probably a pilot for a client as they're just trying to test the services. It could be a short-term project where the client has data that they just need annotation for about a week or so, or a month or 2 months. But then there were long-term projects, like the LiDAR project where we were developing like self-driving cars. It was a big project that took years. So for the shift, you would find that maybe in the morning I would be working on the LiDAR project, and then in the afternoon I had a different project. So what we found is that it gave a lot of exposure where we were working with images, we were working with videos, we were working with maps, like the I don't know what it's called, like the geomaps. We were working with the geomaps, we were doing like the projects, we were doing all these things, and it's all sorts of things. We were doing transcription, and it's where every client has a specific thing they're trying to create an AI system for, and therefore they have their own set of rules about how to go about the annotation process. Yeah.
And so you were working for this company. Were you employed, or what was the relation with you and the company?
Now, okay, before it was employment, we get a contract every month, we sign a contract every month, just paid just enough to not get to the tax bracket. We were responsible. So we were split into two. There was what was called the core team, and then there was us. So the worker was called the independent contractor. So you used to get a contract for an independent contractor. And then there was the core team who are like permanent employees of the company. So the difference was that for the permanent employee, they got benefits. So they could get maternity leave, they had insurance, they were given, for example, pensions, they had bonuses for performance, they were given all the benefits. But then now, because I'm an independent contractor, I just get paid for the number of hours I work. But for example, if a lady wants to go on maternity leave, for example, they're just told you just go. And then when you come back, we'll see if we can find a slot for you. So you just left to go. Yeah.
And now you're a member of the Data Laborers Association. So can you tell me how you came up with this association?
Well, maybe a bit of backstory. So after CloudFactory, because I did that up to 2018, and then not 2020. I did it from 2018 to 2020, and then left CloudFactory, and then got into Remotasks, which I think they rebranded to Outlier, I believe, by Scale AI. And the platform was different in a sense where theirs was more of platform-based work. So this was employment. You go to a physical location at CloudFactory. It's a stringent contract because it's a 1-month contract, but you're signing it every day for 3 years. So you can imagine. But then we get on to Remotask, and there it's more of you just create a profile on the platform. They don't even give you a contract. You just sign, like you consent to the following, information, blah, blah, blah. And for them now it's similar to this, but then for this one, when it started, it was good. I think in Kenya, I was around the 10th person because the main project that they were recruiting for was for LiDAR. But the self-training wasn't sufficient to get somebody from zero knowledge to onboarding. It actually took us a very long time to figure out how to go about doing the test and figuring out the project. So I think I was around the 9th person or 10th person to onboard onto Remotask in Kenya.
And remote means that you also were working from home?
Yes. So the biggest issue with the sector, especially when it comes to data labeling, is the pay. So we found that we were getting paid 20,000 shillings, which is about $180. But the location, because the location where it was situated, it's in a suburb area. So that would mean that I would have to, for example, take 2 vehicles just to get to work. That would cut me, maybe $80 would just go to transport. When it comes to like the expenses working in an office setting made that the residual income after I've paid for the necessary expenses was maybe $100 or so. So that was for rent, for food. If I have children, that is what I need to use for my children and everything. So it was very stringent, and therefore one cannot survive solely based off of the income you get from one company. So by circumstance, you just have to work for one company and then look for other companies to work for over time. So what we did, I used to work for CloudFactory and then Remotasks. So I do the 8 hours at CloudFactory and then come do 8 hours in the evening at Remotasks. Initially, it was good. There weren't too many people. The pay was good because I would probably do one task probably do it in about an hour or so and would get maybe $10. If it was a bit complex, get $20 for that one task. So you can see in a day, it was like really, really good money. And so I kind of left CloudFactory to focus on this one now full time, because if I could put 8 hours in here and 8 hours, so if I combined all the 8 hours and gave them to Remotasks, then that would be a better scenario. So I did that. So the problem is that over time, they kind of degraded their system. It's like the more people onboarded, the less they started paying. The project became more complex. So the task I would do with 1 hour now took me 3 hours. But then pay had reduced from $10 to a point where they would even pay me, say, $2 for work that I did for 3 hours. And then it got, the more they went, the more they recruited, the worse it got. It got to a point where I have done thousands of tasks and they're all under review. But then you find that just out of their 1,000, maybe about 20 of them will pay me. And then some will even pay me as little as $0.0002. So you can see it now became a situation where it's like you're forced to sort of have this backlog of tasks, because among their 1,000 tasks, at least there's maybe 20 tasks that will give you, in a week we used to pull maybe $20. Despite working you remember I was working 18 hours, but now you're forced to constantly be on your laptop. As you can see, even now the laptop is still just around because we got so used to be constantly working. Yeah. So
there was a lot of unpaid labor, you waiting and searching for jobs, but also not being paid for the work that you done.
Yes. It was bad. Because what would happen is, it got to a point that a friend of mine would come and say, I don't have a job. What do you do? I'm like, it's Remotasks, but the pay is not really good. But then they say, I would rather have the $20 than not have anything to do. But then now it would take them about 4 weeks just to start getting paid. Because for them, they need to do this backlog, so that when you have backlog, there's 1 or 2 tasks randomly that will pay you. So you find that even for the first 4 weeks, someone would be working basically for free without any pay. Yeah, so it was crazy. Some projects, they had nudity. Other projects, you'd find that you're working even on dead bodies. And it wasn't, what's the word? It's like the project comes and then you need to work on it. But even if you don't, then you basically have no work. So you kind of put in a situation where you kind of have to work on that project, and it was crazy. And then they used to penalize people for the dumbest things. It was like they used to give a timeline. They could say that this task, we expect you to complete it in 3 hours, for example. And then maybe you work on the task and it's very, very complex. So what happens is, after the 3 hours, the task is taken away from you. But then for the 3 hours that you put in, you will not get paid for those 3 hours. And, it would go to someone else. And we are not sure even if they paid the other person for the work that I had already done. So they were basically exploiting people for free labor. And so afterwards is when we met with a certain lady. Her name is Barhan, a researcher from Stanford. She actually met with Joanne where she was doing her research. It's called AI Harms. And it's like we got so used to the situation where it's like, I work for Remotasks, I only get a few coins or so. And then just look for other platforms where you try to supplement. So it's kind of like you're working for 2 or 3 companies, just trying to, $20 from here, I get $10 there, and then cumulatively you sort of have something. So we got so used to it. It's like you're so much in the picture that you stop seeing the frame, and it becomes a norm. It's like everybody in your space is going through the same thing, so you don't understand that this is not right. But after we came across Barhan, and then we are telling her, like, for example, Appen would send out a project and they would say, hey, we'll pay you $10 to give us 12 pictures of 12 videos of children between the age of 5 and 10 years doing cartwheels, playing, maybe laughing. Like, they would give like specifics and would be like, hey, okay, if it's just pictures, then I don't have a problem. And, go ahead and then take videos if you have a kid. And they would have, and what's funny is, for example, they would tell you to give 10 pictures. And then they would say that out of the 10, 1 was bad. So they would not pay you for that batch. So you can see they're also trying to gain your information and they're trying to collect your information. But so it's a violation of children's rights, which we did not know. And then they're also exploiting us for free labor because a lot of people will provide the images, but they will not get paid. Another issue was there was a lot of tracking software. We used to have software for you to work for Remotasks, for example, CloudFactory. They used to put monitoring software on our laptops. And the thing is, you don't have control over that software. So the moment you switch on your laptop, whether you're working or not, then it just brings itself on. And then from that point on, it's constantly tracking what you're doing on your machine. And you can't even uninstall it unless you format the laptop itself. And then some of them would actually require that you work with your webcam on. So, for someone who's desperate for work and everything, it's just, okay, I don't mind, just do whatever we do. But we don't know if they're collecting information. We don't know if they are taking pictures, if they're using you as a human subject. Don't know about those things. But I actually started to see these things as issues. The moment now it started being laid for us, it's like, no, but this is a violation of this right. There's the data protection rights. You're supposed to, there's the fair pay. But these things, we got so used to them that we used to see like they were normal things and things that, it became so normal that it didn't look like it was anything bad that was going on. Yeah.
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 And then how did you all make the step of starting this association?
Yeah. It's actually been a long process. People have actually started hearing about us now, but we started the association in not exactly started, but through the fellowship, the research that we were doing with Barhan, we started being exposed to, this is a violation of your human rights. This is how you're supposed to address it. And then we started interacting with people in the space, people like Siasa Place, people like Masi Motemi from Zillian Sumbi. She's the one who did the litigation of the Meta case. And, just interacting with them. They've actually helped us a lot in putting us in spaces. We were not formed yet. We're just a collective of 10 members who came together, Joan as the president, and we just were put in spaces where we kind of started to understand something could actually be done about these challenges. So we actually put into meetings and podcasts and not podcasts, but conferences and strategic meetings, just discussing issues in the sector since November of 2023. And we just, were trying to figure out okay, we do know about the collective of data labelers, but surprisingly, everybody in the space is only talking about content moderation, but they are a very small group in the totality of the people working in the digital space. So we wanted to formulate something for data labelers in general that encompassed all the other people who are not being talked about. Initially, we wanted to form a union and we actually went to the COTU offices, but there's a lot of politics in the space. It's very difficult just to get to register a union.
So, what makes it hard to register as a union?
It's like, for example, we applied for a certificate, it was rejected. And then a lot of people who are knowledgeable about the space just told us that it would be a waste of time. Yeah, there's a lot of gatekeeping in the space. There's a lot of politics involved, and we actually had a conversation with someone, and they said that for us, it's funny that as Kenyans, when you talk about politics, it has a negative connotation, but it's what it means. It's like people want to be in political positions for the power, not the actual work. But we are worker-led association. Back then, it wasn't an association, and it's more of I have gone through things. I've gone through all these challenges, and for me, I want to find a solution to all these problems. So I don't really care whether I have a position or not. So we kind of found that we did not align with the current norm of the structures that were in place, and we were therefore trying to figure out what's the other best approach to kind of trying to help workers. that didn't have a lot of, political connotation to it. And that's how we settled on forming an association. Yeah.
And was it also maybe because also politics also really is in favor of getting jobs to Kenya, to Africa?
Yeah. It's more of like the president, for example, said that the goal is to bring 1 million jobs to Kenya, but they are not like they are not fair. They are not like good jobs. It's like it doesn't matter what kind of jobs they are as long as they are jobs. So, for example, like when the Meta case was ruled that they could be convicted in Kenya, the president actually stood up and said that, hey, I'll make sure that I'll change the law to make sure that Samasos is not sued. But they were being sued for a violation of a human right. So it's kind of like trying to find a way where we could be able to, voice our opinions and talk about all these issues and all these things without being gagged and without having to go through someone to give you, like, hey, you need permission to talk about this thing or this other. So that's why we chose to go with an association. Yeah. So we actually applied for a registration certificate in December of 2024. It came through. I think we did the registration. It was in record time. I think maybe a week or so. We got our certificate and then did our official launch in, I think it was February of 2025. Yeah.
Okay, and what does the association contain? So you mentioned before you're with a group of 10 people back then. So what is the structure of it, and what are the points that you're fighting for?
Okay. So we the 10 members were collective, and they are very strategic members because all of them were trainers at some point at Remotasks. Okay. When we were trainers, we have to go back just to kind of explain why that is important. It got to a point where Remotasks started what they called trainer program. So that would entail where they were saying that they wanted to take people who would train other people to get on board onto the platform so that they could get to higher quality faster. But what would happen, we would onboard people for 2 weeks, then people would be allowed to start working by themselves by the 3rd week under monitoring. And then by the 4th week, now they start working by themselves. But you find that there was a lot of churn from the system where it's like you have a target of 100 people every week, but out of the 100 you had this week, 90 of them will drop off from the bootcamp because there was no pay. And so we would have to do recruitment all over again. And so for the 10 members, we tried to find the strategic trainers who are passionate about this making change. And it's because each of the members has thousands of emails of people who went through their bootcamps. And in testament to so, like currently, we have around 800 members of the association, despite only launching in February of 2025. Yeah. So we have strategic members in other companies. So we have someone who's at Summer, for example. You have someone who's at CloudFactory, and that's just to help with, organizing and things of that nature. Yeah.
And the people who are working for those companies, do they also share this information that they are a part of the association online, or so? How is that? So the people that work for the platform companies that are a member of your association, are they afraid of repercussions of the platforms where they're also working for?
Yeah, we actually have one person who was targeted for actually speaking up at the company. And it was because, it's like you're not paying people, but you keep insisting that we, as trainers, we lie to the people that pay will come. So the person actually spoke up, and all of a sudden the person was the best performer, but all of a sudden they start bad grading, you're called for coaching, and you're told that you're not performing and everything. So it's very systemic. It's like they say you have bad quality for like a month or so, and then they kind of sack you from your job, or they intimidate you for just being a part of the association. And I think it's why also the union conversation is very difficult to have, because it's kind of, when you're a member of a union, it's kind of you're declaring yourself as a member of a union. But at least for the association, I think members are just present without really being put out there as members of the association.
Because when they were publicly a member, and then it could also face its repercussions.
Yeah.
And how did you find all those people? Because you said we started in February this year. It's now, when we're recording, it's now end of May.
Yes.
So not so much time. So at what way did you find the people to join you?
To be honest, it's all been word of mouth. Yeah, like I said, okay, I'll give you an example. Like a place at Summer Source, we saw that the content moderators, they have about 500 content moderators at Summer Source, but then the company employs 10,000 people, and the 10,000 people, so the other 9,500 are actually data labelers. The, transcriptionists, people working on data entry, data annotation, and all those. So there's a very large population of workers. And so it's been very easy, because you find that we actually haven't started doing any active campaigning for joining. And funny enough, we still find that the numbers are consistently growing, even as it's just growing organically. Yeah.
Okay, that's really good to hear. And what are the main points on your agenda?
So the first one, we want to do community. Okay, so the first one is policy and advocacy. So we basically are involved in conversations. We actually won a policy hackathon, where we come up with an idea on how you feel that you can impact policy to create positive impact. And we know that we are actively in conversation with people trying to change the laws to make sure that this conversation is being heard at the government level and everything, but it's very slow. So we actually won the policy where we said we wanted to create a code of conduct that we wanted to draft with the workers, and also with members of the government. Like the Ministry of Labor is already on board. We have the Ministry of ICT, which hosted the policy hackathon, for example. And then we want to engage the body responsible for human rights in Kenya. So if we can be able to create a code of conduct, and also the employer as well, and then we can try to, talk to the employers to see if they can adopt the code of conduct where we're saying pay people fairly. We're not talking about the Philippines are being paid $50, you're only paying $1. We're not saying pay them $15, but at least give them something that would bring them to the minimum wage for, the Kenyan person. If it's in terms of like the human rights, like just treat people decently. Why not offer maternity leave, for example? Because as it stands right now, even if I wanted to go on leave, I can't go. I do have leave days, but then they'll dictate when I go on leave. Or I can be on leave and I'll be told, hey, come back to work or you'll get fired. So it's just, we want to come up with collectives that we feel that can be adopted as we wait for the actual law to be instated. The second one is on mental health. So we want to do mental health workshops, where we want to pay for practitioners, and then the workers themselves can be offered the practitioners from the data labelers as a service for free. So if you feel like you need any mental help or any mental support, then you can just come and we can provide the counseling for you free of charge. The third one was on upskilling. So we wanted to find ways where we can upgrade. Because, for example, somebody who's done data annotation actively, if you look at something like data analysis, you're basically doing all the work apart from the actual analysis, the preparation, the cleaning, the preparing the data and all that process. So just the upskilling to this new skill is very easy for us, and we're trying to find partners who can help us with that. Luckily, we do have people in the space, someone like the PLP project, the Powerland project, who are already doing that with the Microsoft, for example, and we are trying to benchmark with them just to see how they do their own thing. And then finally, we want to do civic education and community building, where we bring people You see, like how, for example, me, I thought it was normal just to be in the space and not be paid, not to work with the contract, work on this bad content and do all these things. But I did not know that it was not right. So if we can also do civic education where we can empower people to know that, hey, this is not right, then we hope that we can also, other than just the associations and the unions, workers themselves can also stand up and, speak up against the injustices that are happening in the companies. Yeah.
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 And there's also always the balance between short term and long term. I think that's also where you also show the difference between where government and unions are choosing for and where worker organizations are choosing for. So government says, okay, we want 1 million jobs, but they're not looking to the quality of the jobs. And they say, okay, but a poor job is better than no job. At the other side, you also have a generation that you really want to facilitate with exploiting their opportunities on the long term. So this is also a kind of dilemma in short and long term. Although after some conversations, I think the dilemma is less dilemma than I thought a couple of weeks before. So how do you look to this discussion?
I think first it would start with just the basic, because there are things that can be, instituted or taken care of without necessarily having it being, because in short term, if, for example, we tried to institute, for example, pay for overtime, or if you won't pay me for overtime, let me just work the 8 hours and whatever I provide is okay, but not threatening, sacking me because I didn't work extra hours without pay. So there are things such as the working conditions, for example, that is very simple. It's just human decency from the employer side. And it's about also, educating the workers, for example, which we've been trying to be actively doing, having conversations with people. Because what we find is that there's more conversation around the spaces. You find that there's a spark of conversation among the group in the WhatsApp, for example, or someone spoke up and the other people, protected the person. And so for that, it's more of if we can get the basic, human decency in the workplaces, then that would be good. But then now when it comes to now the structures, then that's where we would look at, situations like, for example, the regulations that dictate, hey, by the way, if you're in Kenya, this is the minimum wage, for example. So if you want to pay people, this is the least amount that you can pay. But I think that would be a conversation that would take a bit longer, to have that kind of conversation.
Yeah, so I say it's also a combination of also short and long term topics and actions.
Yes,
where you say, okay, so in the end, even precarious work, every worker deserves basic human rights or basic rights, which are being paid for the time that you're working. Also, have a kind of a governance structure where you can also complain or ask without the fear of being kicked out.
Yes.
And these kind of things.
And those things I don't think would take time. It's something that can be quickly instituted and enforced. Without necessarily having to change the law or things of that nature.
And we also think because there's also a big lobby. So of course every stakeholder is lobbying because everybody is trying to defend their rights, and sometimes, or many times, there's of course a conflict in those interests. What you also see is that the companies, they're really using special words. So I think wording is also really important. Even in your introduction, you said, okay, we're doing AI, we're working AI, but in the end, it's labeling data, which then in the end being used to AI. In Netherlands, there's also a big platform for data labeling, and last week there was a big article in a Dutch newspaper where they said, it's the Netherlands' biggest AI company. And they said, no, they are maybe a temp agency or whatever, or a business process organization, but they're not a AI company. And also within this regulation, you also hear a lot about, we need to have new regulation because this is new. And in the end, especially with the on-location work, it's the same as customer support. There's people in a building doing work which is nothing new. So in the end, I think also many existing regulation could also apply to fix the basic problems of this sector.
Yeah, and it's sad that it's a very slow process just to change the law, but at least now there's step and there's talk towards it. So it will be a slow process, but at least we know that there's something that is going on in the pipeline to at least see if the necessary changes can come about. And it's good to be part of that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you'll say is that also by making this category and these problems visible, then people can't ignore it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge actually with what we've seen is that whenever we put in these spaces, there was we went to one of the events, even by Kiktanet, for example, and as we are speaking, the people at the top only know about the surface level of AI, where it's like, it's a $1 billion empire. So we need to learn how to get more taxes from the industry because it's not taxed. We need to figure out how we can bring more jobs to the country, but they don't understand the plight of the workers themselves. So I find that even as they're making policies and they are going about law and everything, they are working from a perspective of trying to, tax the tech companies and all that without knowledge that the actual workers are actually suffering. So even bringing them to the awareness of, hey, these are the things that are going on. People are suffering from PTSD, back problems from sitting for too many hours and things of that nature. It's like you give stories and they are very shocked. It's like we did not know these things were happening. And just what we are calling civic education, even of the policy makers, is something that we see that is now helping us a lot when it comes to having it's easier to have the conversations now than it was a few months ago.
Yeah. And what made the difference between now and a few months ago?
A lot of people a lot of people did not know what data labeling is. So that would be the first conversation. It's like, this is the data labeling. And then the second thing is that a lot of people did not understand or were not aware of the challenges that people are facing. And this was obvious when we went to an ILO conference. And we were sitting in the meeting, and when they talked about it, they said there were only 400. They mentioned that there was 400,000 digital workers in Kenya, but just from Remotasks alone, leave alone all the other platforms, we know for a fact that over 400,000 people have worked on this platform. And then as they go into the challenges, they were mostly speaking about the cab hailing drivers, the Ubers, the Bolts and all that. So we saw that there was a gap where there's this whole big group of people that were not represented in the space, and just making people aware, putting out awareness that, hey, there's this large group of people that work and they are not seen. They're in the background of everything is one of the biggest things that we see has brought a lot of change from back then to now.
Yeah, maybe policymakers also were a bit afraid of the topic because when you talk about legislation, ride-hailing or what is taxi? I really hate the word ride-hailing because it's just taxi. It's a nice frame which everybody copies, but it's just taxi, of course.
Yeah.
And also delivery, they're really visible on the streets, but they're also on location work. So if you make regulation, you can do it because demand and supply are in the same country, most of the times even in the same city.
Yeah.
And the problem, of course, with online work is that the demand and supply are at different continents most of the time. So I think also that maybe policymakers quite long avoided the discussion on the online work because they knew, okay, this is going to be really complex because there's no global labor law or whatever. So the solutions are even harder than with the on location work.
Yeah.
At the other side, in the end, it's labor being done on location. So that also can be the excuse of saying, okay, it's complex and maybe we need to wait for 5 years before we know what we need to do.
Yeah, and I think it's why for us we try to be creative in the space, and it's why we, for example, are trying to come up with a code of conduct, because if we can get a few employers to adopt it, for example, we feel that it can be something that can be able to push to other employers, just because if we did have CloudFactory, for example, since I joined in 2018 and since 2016 has consistently given a 1-month contract. We don't know if it is through all the noise we are doing and all the civic education, but then a new project that came up at CloudFactory, they actually gave out 3 months contracts, and they're actually paying people more, a pay differential for example, when they are working the night shift, for example, people are paid more, and they're also given transport on top of the basic pay. So we find that, for example, the code of conduct is something that we can be able to institute, and it makes sense even to the employer. It's something that we feel can at least better the lives of people before we can get to the regulation point, which we feel would make a huge difference for people. Because a lot of people, despite saying, okay, you increased your rate from 1.3 to 2.4, it's not such a big difference. But then people are so used to living on this 1.3 that the 2.4 actually feels like, there's hope that things could get better in the space, and people are actually looking at the company with a hopeful eye. And we are hoping that we can do that for the industry and maybe even improve it further.
Yeah, I think for the crowdsourcing code, maybe also interesting to look at the German crowdsourcing codes by some platforms.
Yeah,
I think even the first Wage Indicator podcast was about it. An interview I did with one of the founders.
Yeah.
And they also see that in the end, I think the biggest challenge with a code of conduct is that you also need to survive the momentum. So when the momentum is when everybody signs, then you have attention. But what happens in 1, 2, 3, or 4 years? So I think it would be really important to see, okay, how can you, make this also on a long term successfully?
Yeah. I think for the long term, ideally it would be through regulation. I think that's bottom line, because if the country has standards that you need to adhere to in order to operate in the country, then it would be very difficult for the companies to go against it. Because I think what pushes people also to go into the platforms is they are used to the companies here. And you find that if, for example, I can get 20,000 shillings and I go to the office, and I can make the same amount when I work on the platform, I would rather work on the platform because the logistics are cheaper. See, but if we can get to a point where through regulation, like people working in the employers working in the sector or bringing jobs to the sector, pay well, then I would be incentivized to work for this company rather than on the platform. And I think that by proxy would just push the platforms to be better and provide better jobs in the sector. Yeah.
And what about the clients? Because we're talking about the workers, we're talking about legislation, policymakers, we're talking about the platform companies.
Yeah.
But in the end, and that is of course a big difference with taxi and delivery. With taxi delivery, the consumer is the client.
Yeah.
So you have many clients. But with the data work, there are companies who are clients of the platforms. So what kind of responsibility and what kind of role, maybe also what kind of lobby can you do to these stakeholders? So how can you also make them aware about also their responsibility for their supply chain?
Okay. There was this conversation we had with some members from Uniglobal, Benjamin, and one of the conversations we had was, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a treaty of sorts. And this treaty is in the shoemaking industry. It's where they go to a company like Adidas, and then they go and say that these are the challenges. Because initially what happened is there was a union, I think it was in either the Philippines or India or someplace. And what they would do is there are several factories, and then they would go to one factory and try to tell them that, hey, these are the conditions, so you need to do this and this and this and that. But what would happen is they would say, hey, I would like to adopt this, but then I would be making losses because another company is doing that. So it was very difficult. But then they actually went directly to the client, and then they say, hey, this we feel are the conditions that you would need to give to the people you're outsourcing the work to, who give work to the employees. And we feel that if you enforced it like this, like if you want to work with us and we give you, the contracts or the tenders and everything, then these are the things that you need to institute. Then it became a lot easier because it became sort of a code of conduct. So I think the client has a lot of power But I think the biggest problem is that a lot of the clients don't know that these tech companies are actually taking advantage of their workers. And that's why it's so important to, speak up, give these stories and all these things just to make them aware. There was actually the research that was done by 60 Minutes. They actually said that the tech companies paid $12 per hour. But then here in Kenya, the employees paid at $1 per hour. But they are the one who are doing the majority of the work. So you can see that if, for example, the client would insist on, hey, pay these people well, then we believe that also change can be instituted from a client perspective.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think the client is way too inactive in those discussions. The same also like with social media, with Facebook and with X/Twitter.
Yeah.
In the end, without clients buying advertisements, Facebook is gone. So I think clients also need to take more responsibility in that, because they also have to have the power to make things change.
Yeah.
And what are your plans for let's say coming year? 6 months, whatever you want.
Yeah. We actually, we are only maybe 4 months in, so we are still trying to put up. We have basic structures. We have the skeleton of the association, but we want to have proper working structures. But then even in the background, we're still working on, for example, the code of conduct, which we're about to start working on it. And that would involve a lot of engagement between workers, between stakeholders in the government, between employers, hopefully even with clients, and just trying to come up with a code of conduct. I think that's what's taking most of our time. We're also trying to find strategic partnerships where, when you talk about, for example, the mental health workshops, we're also trying to see if we can find partners who will work with us to be able to provide the services so that we can be able to offer that. But then actively, we're also trying to build engagement with workers. I think the workers have been very quiet because out of fear of intimidation or being fired or things of that nature. But then we've been encouraging workers, and I think that's why our member base has grown so fast. It's because we are providing them a platform where they can be able to speak up and talk. Yeah. So I think that's basically what we'll be doing for the next 6 months, and also just trying to grow our membership. Yeah.
And are there some points where you also can need some help, maybe from one of our listeners?
Yeah. We've actually been, all these things we've done from pocket, from the 10 members. We just try to do everything from pocket. We don't have an office. Everybody is forced to work on different things just to facilitate everything that is going on. We did want to do a mapping. I forgot to mention, because there were questions you were asked. Someone asked us and said, how many of your membership, for example, are people who are disabled? How many are women? And we have membership, but we don't know the exact. And then we also had an interview with someone, and for them, they said that, hey, I have been doing data annotation in the space since 2017. And then you go ahead and ask how many companies, which are the companies you've worked for? And he goes ahead and mentioned 12 companies I've never heard of, despite also working in the industry since 2018. So I find that there's also a knowledge gap between what is going on in the industry and, what we know. Even for us, as me working in the industry, I don't know everything about it. And therefore, we wanted to do a mapping just to kind of understand what the scope of the workers working in the digital space looks like. So it's our main project. It's our biggest project, aside from now the code of conduct and all that. But I think our biggest challenge is the funding. We need to pay people. We need to pay for location. We need to have a central point where we can, do all this work. And it's been a struggle because everybody is everywhere, and we're just trying to find our way through this whole thing. Yeah. But ideally, we also would like to have strategic partners. For example, like we mentioned, the mental health professionals. We also were looking for someone who would help us with the upskilling, for example. I don't have the ability to teach someone how to do data analysis, but if we could partner with people who are very passionate about teaching people how to have these skills, and then also certifying, who have the ability to certify these people so that they can look for jobs, that would be good. And then also for the civic education part, there are people who are experts at that. So strategic partners and funding is mostly what we are looking for. Yeah.
Okay, let's hope that's also one of our listeners can also contact you. I will also share the information also to your LinkedIn page in the comments, so people can contact you when they have ideas on that.
Maybe to contact us, you can text us at our email. It's our main source of communication. You can reach out. It's info@datalabelers.org. You can also find us on LinkedIn as the Data Labelers Association. Personally, you can find me on LinkedIn as Ephantus Kanyugi. It's Ephantus, Ephantus Kanyugi. And then for president, it's Joanne Kenya. She's the most active when it comes to engagements with people. So she is the best. So you can find her also on LinkedIn. She's Joanne Kenya, and her email would be joanne.kenya@datalabelers.org. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a good conversation. Yeah, and look forward to more. Thank you.